Okay, so we're on chapter 5.
Yeah.
The chapter about the blessing of a soul.
Soulmate.
Yes, soul friendship, the practice of soul friendship. Yeah. And that's a phrase that many of you are familiar with. I'm pretty sure it's been around for a while. It's Irish phrase. This means that, soul friend.
I have a book a friend gave to me.
Yeah.
That's the name of it.
Yes, John O'Donohue wrote a book. Is that who wrote that one?
Yeah.
About that. I used to work somewhere and they did a magazine and the rector called the magazine Kara. So that whatever the writings were or the reflections or whatever could have that same impact, something that would, you could carry with you, things that you could read and then would stay with you, right?
Hey, Liz.
Hi, Liz.
Good morning.
I went home, Liz. If you were worried that I stayed here all night, I did go home.
You got the same clothes on still?
We changed our outfits. She was here for movie night.
That was an interesting movie.
It was a good movie.
What's the movie?
I'll See You in My Dreams. It was a Blythe David Sam Elliott movie. I know.
Yeah.
He's hot.
She's pretty.
And she's pretty.
Yeah.
So it was good. It was a good movie.
It's about a widow and two men that keep her occupied for a while.
Coming in and out of her life in weird ways.
If I can find.
I think you'd enjoy it. I cried when I watched it at home. I didn't cry last night, but because I knew what was going to happen.
I need a girl movie this weekend, so that's what I watch.
Well, it's the 35th anniversary of Steel Magnolias.
Oh, is it?
Oh, good.
That may be something else. John's leaving town, so.
Yeah, that's another one you might watch. I tried to get us to, and everybody's like, you pick all the girl movies, chick flicks, you gotta have something. But the two men that were in the room last night, I'm not sure how they felt about that.
Last night.
Yeah. I don't think of it like that, because to me, it's just a movie. I get it. It didn't have any guns in it, and everyone looked like a person, not an alien, so maybe that's what makes it a movie for women. I'm not sure.
No car chases.
No car chases, no wrecks. Yeah. And not a lot there's one swear word, I think, and there wasn't a sex scene per se. There was just a scene of the two of them in bed afterward, but nothing graphic in any way, but we were getting a little risque, I guess. Following the Jesus revolution from the month before. All right, well.
Watch this weekend on that.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. I love this line that she says, St. Bridget says, right on page 53, where she says, go forth and eat nothing until you get a soul friend. For anyone without a soul friend is like a body without a head, is like water of a polluted lake, neither good for drinking nor for washing. That is the person without a soul friend. Sometimes that happens to be the person we might be married to. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes it's maybe someone that we contract with to be that person for us, meaning a spiritual director, right? Someone that you see on a regular basis or make an appointment with, talk to, someone who knows your spiritual journey. Sometimes it's your sister or a friend. Sometimes it could have been a neighbor. In your case, I'm thinking, Lynn, about your aunt, how she was that for you growing up. And,
And I think I knew that from time I could communicate and walk and know who she was. Because I always knew she was there for me, and she was always there for me. No question.
Yeah. And I'm imagining, I don't know because I didn't meet her, but imagining for her it was reciprocal, even if you were younger and, a child and for some part of that, and, even though not always, but, there is a reciprocity to it too. It's not just like a therapist that you might pay and listens and then, tries to direct you in a particular way. It is someone who both So I have had a spiritual director, and I would consider her to be my Carla. She's been my spiritual director for 7 years. We still communicate via Zoom because she's in Portland. And,
That's nice.
yes, and what's very nice because, now she has cancer.
Mm.
She was in a terrible car accident. The car accident, they found out that she had breast cancer.
Goodness.
She's undergoing treatment. We meet once or twice a month, depending on what our schedules are, but, and the reason I say that is just because I feel like she can share with me how that's impacting her as much as I can talk to her about what's going on in my life.
Mhm.
And we agree that that's our relationship with each other. Sometimes it's more clinical with people, that I wouldn't consider that to be a soul friend, but our relationship is sort of moved in a direction of soul friend.
How serious is it? I mean, cancer's already serious, but it's early caught already.
I think they caught it when they could. The treatment's different than I remember treatment being, like, now go through this full round of chemo and then re-image everything and then do radiation and then at the very end do surgery.
That's what they're doing instead.
And it's just very interesting because back in the day it was like,
Take it out.
take it out and then you start the whole round of stuff.
Yeah.
So I, she's lost all of her hair and
Yeah.
her eyebrows and everything else. And so we've tried to schedule our meeting times when it's like that off week that she gets between where she feels better.
Yeah.
That's good.
You know, my aunt died of cancer too, and we were living up here at the time, and I never will forget the day that she called me and told me something was going on. And she didn't say specifically cancer, but I knew it was just from our conversation. And she just said very bluntly, she said, I'm not going to treat it. She said, why go through all that mess, have radiation and chemotherapy, and all your hair falls out, and then 18 months later you die. And it was long. And very selfishly, I said, why would you do that?
Mhm.
And I realized I was being selfish because I didn't want her.
You didn't want her to go.
I didn't want her to go. I couldn't turn loose of her. But then the more I thought about it, I called her back the next day and I said, you've made the right decision. It's not my decision to make. So, we were just that close and always had been that we could talk real honestly with
That's
each
good.
other. So,
I think that's a quality of this, that
Yes,
honest sharing and conversation.
yeah. So I realized, and I do have a soul friend now that I've had since high school days, and we're apart some and then we're together some, but it's always, we just pick right back up from where we left off. So
Mhm.
she's been a really important part of my life too.
Yeah. And I think that it's true, and not, it's not like to sort of say there's a deficit in your life if you don't have one, but I'm saying if you do have one, you do know the joy of that you can share and belong, and that you have that sense of that. So, yeah, it is. So what does she say at the bottom? When you have a friend like that, it cuts across all convention and category. You were joined in an ancient and eternal way with the friend of your soul.
Mhm.
And I think if you don't have one now, you probably have had one, right? There's someone, like, I think Lynn, you described it so well, that when you get together, it's not like, you want to know what's happened in each other's lives, but you don't feel like you have to go back to square one
No.
and start over, and, you just pick up where you left off, and we've all had that feeling, and there's nothing forced about it generally. And usually it's very reciprocal, otherwise it probably wouldn't work. Yeah, so something that you both do, so, yeah.
Beverly was a soul friend to me.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
very much so.
Yeah.
Because I like what it said, that age, doesn't matter, and we were different politically and everything, almost every way, but still, something about it.
She were open-minded, obviously, and it was great. You could be that close and be, obviously politics is dividing a lot of people today.
But because we're talking about that connection, that's a soul connection, a spiritual connection. And if your soul friend is in the same way you are, like, how important is God in your life? And how does God direct your life? And how does God, influence your life? And then how do you guys share that? I think that's the part that makes it the soul friend. Right? The other part is something about who you are,
Right.
but not necessarily about how you get fed. Right? Or how you feed others. Good morning, Kay.
Good morning. Sorry to be late.
It's a very small group this morning. A lot of our friends are doing other things. So, we were talking about just that, the practice of soul friendship, because that's the chapter we're on, and people were sharing about soul friends they've had, and how that's kind of different than maybe other friendships that you have, friendships based maybe in, professional friendships. People have had those, or, moms of other people's children have been friends with me that were not soul friends, but, we shared the raising of our kids together and stuff like that. And sometimes it can be lucky enough to be someone in your family. Like my sister and I think are soul friends. Although sometimes a little bit more strained.
I was gonna say, I've heard you talk about.
I know.
Really? She's not ugly about her sister.
I'm not,
No.
but it is sometimes frustrating. So anybody else? Maybe as we go along, you might, even if you're struggling right now to be like, do I have a soul friend? Have I ever had a soul friend? Whatever, maybe something else will, come up for you as we read through it. Like it's just, you may not think of them that way. Or at least maybe you'll think of one in the past, or someone who was important to you at a particular time in your life, that helped, that walked with you on a particular part of your journey. And like all these spiritual practices, right, there are going to be some that resonate really strongly with you, I think. And there'll be some that you're like, I don't know, right? Is that me? And I hope that you can read it without judgment. Like if you don't understand or haven't participated in, say, a soul connection with someone, I don't think that is anything, but maybe it's some way you look, something you could anticipate happening, right? It's not like a judgment about why haven't you done this? It's something maybe you can anticipate happening. Like when we were talking about thresholds, I know for many of you, as the more we discussed it, the more you were able to see when those thresholds had occurred in your own life, or when they were occurring, or the possibility that they might occur, right? And I hope that you would read this in that same way, and everything that she writes, because she's compacted a bunch of things into a book that we're reading pretty rapidly, and engaging with pretty, it's a very short time, but week to week, that's a lot to sort of take in and process. I think of it more like a textbook. You know how you'd go to class and your professor would say, we're only going to read chapters 1 and 7, or here's a handout for a book, just a chapter blank. This is sort of that way, right? Like, I don't expect everybody's going to internalize everything she writes, although how lovely that would be. I wish I could do that. But that we are going to find that place where it syncs up with us, I think. Somewhere along the line, you're going to find something. And it might be in one of the exercises, right? Like it might not even be in the words she's written about a particular practice. It might be in an exercise that she's recommended. I have found the exercises around writing to be really easy for me to engage with. I don't even feel pressured by them, or I don't feel, like there's a certain thing I have to achieve in order to do it. I just felt like, this is someplace I can enter in on. Or the photography in the same way, like, using your phone or taking a walk or whatever it is. I think the exercises probably have been more helpful than even the information, the knowledge that I'm gaining. Just that way to sort of see life in a more comprehensive way, right? Mm-hmm. To appreciate, and see that, which is the Celtic way, to appreciate it and see how it comes from God. Instead of, I don't know, it could be from a lot of things, but I was talking to my yard today, right? Like I went out and I said, I'm really sorry, but we're not going to be home again. So, I hope you all can wait till June, because then in June, I'll
Have time to take care of you.
in
July.
And maybe everything's not dead by then. We'll be there.
It won't be. Nature will take care of it.
Nature will take care of it,
Yeah.
They're certainly taking care of it long before they put that house down
Yeah,
there.
exactly. I talk to my garden a lot. I mean,
I talk to everything I see else.
yes, I know, we're on the same page there. I do.
And I'm not a writer, I've never
No.
been a journal keeper, things like that, but I thought for this class it would help, so I bought a notebook. I started decorating it with some tape and stuff.
Yeah.
So I have been writing and, it's just getting started. It's difficult, but then I enjoy it when
you're doing it.
I need to try it,
Yeah.
You don't know if you like something unless you try it.
That's right. Anybody else been writing a little bit? No?
Not a journaler.
No.
Journal keeper a long time. I've let it slip in the last several months. And I've been fussing at myself that I've let it go.
Yeah.
There was a time a few years ago that I thought, oh, I've got a bunch of tablets here that I've been journaling in every day for a long time. I think maybe I better burn these things up.
And my brother-in-law, scanned them all in, so he has them.
That's good.
Yeah, he's been journaling since his, he's been here for years, decades. I mean,
Well, the people that write books about their past and their childhood, they must have always been journalers because.
I can't remember those things. I know.
I mean, how did they remember
They
all
were
that
good. I had
stuff?
a niece who died several years ago and fairly young. And she apparently had been journaling, and her husband told me, Ginger, I just had the greatest thrill because in straightening up and going through our bedroom, I found this drawer where Tony had some books, tablets, where she had been journaling, and I had no idea that she had done that. So I've just had the best time reading her journals. I've learned more about her even after all these years we've been married. But it's been great for my soul, for my heart. That's good. And I thought, okay, Ginger, that was probably stupid to burn something.
No, keep them, because I've got my mother's old journals when she was in her 20s and 30s. And just reading about them, she grew up in New York City, and she had a lot of interesting experiences, like Amelia Earhart was one of the speakers at her Y, and things like that. And I just love reading. Yeah, she was a great writer too. She made it very interesting.
Yes, I wouldn't worry about my handwriting.
That's what the computer's for now.
That's right. That's right. So, let's go to page 54. If you have a hard copy, I don't know how that works in the digital world.
Well, we don't have a digital person today.
No. We've already talked about some of the qualities of a soul friend, that truthfulness and honesty should be part of that. It enforces, this is a part about the communal and corporate nature of Celtic spirituality. And here's why, because they offer us courage to say yes to the big dreams buried in us. They help us to gain clarity. So there, you can see then what the qualities of that person were. And if you're thinking back over, was someone a soul friend, or you were trying to decide, was that person a soul friend? Maybe if they had some of those qualities that were encouraging for you or gave you permission. We're all on the journey of discernment, friends. It's not just, my stories of discernment really do culminate in kind of becoming a priest. And, that's one level of this. But we all are discerning, what is God calling us to? Who are we? Who has God created us to be? And how are we living that out or not living that out, right? And that's why I think a soul friend gives you someplace to rehearse those things, to talk about those things. Is there anything there that you're struggling with, or that you resonated with you? I think that one of the thing that she says though, if maybe none of these things are possible, but it's someone that you have intentional conversations with. Just, what does that mean? Means I know what I'm gonna say and I say what I'm gonna say. And I invite other people or I invite that person to give me their reaction to what I've said. That takes courage. That takes vulnerability. You can think of all the things reasons you might not want that. Trust, right? It has to be someone you trust. I don't think you just go up to someone in Ingalls and, start telling them about the fact that you're struggling with something in your spiritual life. You might, but you probably wouldn't. And I think you want, there's a, what is it? Like, there are just some things in our lives we just don't share with everyone. We just don't, because they're precious to us, right? And so it'd be like, what is the expression from scripture? Throwing pearls before swine. There's a thing about how, if it's special to us or important to us, we don't just broadcast it everywhere. Generally speaking.
What was I gonna say? Some people do on Facebook.
Yeah.
Well, it's very,
Or these reality shows and
Right.
stuff, it's just
I know.
amazing what people,
right.
Yeah, but how real
yeah,
are the reality shows?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's just it, they do, and I think that maybe it might be the qualifier, for us, is that we probably wouldn't. I think, I enjoy reading sort of like memoirs of people, because when I see some of the things people have overcome, what they have done to sort of achieve what they have achieved in their life, I'm always feel like, well, then my life isn't so bad, or I didn't have it like that, or whatever, I'm gonna. But on the other hand, it takes a certain kind of person to sort of broadcast some of that. But I remember when we read together years ago, the Diana Butler Bass book about freeing Jesus. Remember that? That was a book we read together right when I first got here. And that book is part memoir and then part theology and a couple of other things. Remember? That's how I learned about your aunt. That was the first book we read together. Anyway, she's able in her writing, like that's what makes it accessible in some ways too. Her ability to share something that she became her ability to do that made that book seem like there's a way for me to enter into her story. And that's what happens in A Soul Friend. There's a way for our stories to be interchanged. They're not the same story. They're not even the same circumstance probably. But whatever that is about that, maybe it's just the vulnerability to share it. It could just be that. It doesn't have to be that, oh yeah, we went to school at exactly the same time and we had exactly the same experience that I can identify with you. No, that's not what a soul friend is, right? It's a soul friend is, I know enough of that story and I see how you responded to it, meaning the author or the person you're talking to, that there's a place for my story to fit inside of that. That's how we say when we read scripture. How do we do that in scripture? We do it because our story can fit inside of that larger story. Otherwise, it's just, I don't know, it's history or it's words on a page or I don't really get it. Sometimes I understand that too. But our story has to fit somewhere inside of that. And I think a soul friend gives you a space for that, for your story or their story to fit in your story, right? Not exactly the same story, obviously, but enough room, enough space for the stories to fit together in a particular kind of way. Yeah. Yeah. Well, she goes on to talk about discernment. And this is the more, I guess, psychological in some ways part of this chapter. As we, as sometimes what happens, I think, or at least this was, I think, again, the author's story, right? How we have conflicting voices within us. I think I remember that, like the woman who wanted to be the worker, to have a job or a vocation, and then also the woman who wanted to raise her children, and the woman who wanted to be a part of the community, and like what were the most important parts, and how. And that's a exterior thing, vocation and stuff. there's also the interior kinds of conversations that we have about ourselves, right? Am I kind? Do I love God? Do I love other people? What are the circumstances that I find myself in?
Mhm.
And I hope when you read that, you don't feel like, I don't think that's unusual, is what I'm saying. I think we've all had times in our lives when we've been more or less conflicted about something. And it could be about anything. Can you all, does it bring up anything for any of you all?
Well, I was very fortunate that I was a stay-at-home mom. And that was my job as far as I was concerned, raising two children, you know, and truthfully, when I was raising my children, they're 48 and 50 now. There were a lot of stay-at-home moms, and yeah, you would encounter people that would say, what do you do? Well, I raise my children, I'm a stay-at-home mom. And then they would almost make you feel guilty about it, like, that's not a job. And I thought, well, you're obviously not raising yours, somebody else's, or you would know that it really is a job. I don't know that, and I never felt really conflicted about it, because when we got married, that's what my husband and I mean, that was just the way we had planned our lives. I don't know that that goes on so much anymore, because most women do work outside the home now.
How was it when they were grown? Like that, how was their conflict then? You know, once they were not needing their mom in that same way.
Well, it was a little bit difficult for me after they were gone, but I got over it.
So I gotta have time for those kids.
But I still didn't ever, I mean, I've had a couple of part-time jobs, but I've just always been a homebody and just wanted to be at home, and that's where my husband loved for me to do. And again, I was fortunate that I could do that and they were comfortable.
Yeah.
You know, it's not what my daughter has chosen. I mean, she hasn't had a choice because she's a single mom. But I think even if she was not, I think she would still be in the job market. Things have just changed so much today. But yeah, I mean,
But even discernment that we have about, I don't know, should I do this or that? Should I be on this committee or should I do this?
Yeah.
Should I pick up Ginger or should I lay in bed? I don't know. I mean, you know, because it like, you know, I mean, we have things that go through our heads all the time about, you know, what is my level of commitment to something? How much do I want to be involved in that? How much, you know, do I want to give to something else? And, you know, and sometimes for me, it's just like, seriously, the getting out of bed part. I mean, I'm not, you know, I could sometimes just roll over, right?
Yeah.
But so that's, I mean, I don't know if that's the way God and I talk now, is because when you know, I'm laying there thinking I could go back to sleep, and I think, maybe I just turn this out, just have a conversation with God about it, rather than me deciding I just want to go back to sleep, that I'm just tired. You know, and sometimes I do go back to sleep, right? But sometimes I get up and get on with whatever is, you know, that I think I ought to be doing or should be doing, or probably need to do. But, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things I get conflicted about, is how much time do I save for myself and how much time do I give to others? Because I am I need my me time to be healthy.
Yeah.
But sometimes I think I'm grabbing too much me time and I need to be out there doing more.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. And then some of us who are still in relationships, how much time are we giving to those relationships? And is it just for a season? And just, this is what's going on with me, you know, is this just for a season? And I can sort of say, this is for a season, and then I'm going to be, you know, have my me time back. Yeah, so the conflicts can be otherwise, not maybe life changing, but maybe life defining. Okay, yeah, life defining, and how a soul friend would help with that. Just someone to process things with. And maybe this is more, like, we're all women here today. And I think for most women, being able to articulate something, even if it doesn't come out right, or even if it's kind of not fully formed, we appreciate that. Like, it doesn't mean someone has to say, well, you should do this, this, and this, right? I'm not looking for someone to say this, this, and this. I'm really looking for someone that just says, uh-huh, right?
I hear you.
I hear you, I understand you. Or if they don't understand, to sort of say, well, I don't understand, could you say more about that?
Uh-huh.
Fine. I don't know that a lot of men, I mean, in my own life, Todd is not a external processor. He does it here and then he has an answer, right? And so I think there's sometimes a soul friend can just sit with us when we do that sort of thing. And some of us do that even if we're not externally processing it, that's going on between our ears. That's going on inside of our head.
Yeah.
Even if we're not saying it out loud, that's the kind of thing I'm thinking of, is these sort of dialogues that go on inside our head. You know, where we weigh those things or measure them out. And so we look for some place to sort of hear that. Right? And what I mean by hear that is, we've said it and then we hear ourselves saying it along with someone else. And I think that that's the tie-in between the psychology of this and the spirituality of this. There's an overlap. I think that's what the author is trying to tell us. There's a little excerpt here on page 56 that she says I don't know who the poet is, but she said, when I contemplate my sins, grant me tears always. For great are the claims of tears on cheeks. Grant me tears when rising, grant me tears when resting. Beyond your every gift, altogether for love of you, Mary's Son. Grant me tears in bed to moisten my pillow, so that his dear ones may help to cure the soul. And if we're able, she's talking about someone being fully present to someone else, to have that experience with someone else. And that our emotional life is not that removed from our spiritual life, or our desires and our needs. And they're not sort of compartmentalized, like I think we've all learned to do. I'm just speaking broadly. You can disagree with me, but I think we are kind of trained to sort of put our things in certain places, or say, I'm not dealing with that right now. Right now, I'm gonna do this. It doesn't mean you can go around, I think all those things are necessary. So
Sooner or later, that bucket you're not dealing with overflows, you have to deal with.
you have to deal with it. And so this grace of tears is just such a beautiful way to say that.
Yeah.
And I know that there are periods of our life where tears feel closer than other times. And so it's hard to see at those moments that grace of tears, that's a welcome thing. And I think it's, someone said to me once, and so it's not my expression, but I use it with other people, that tears are holy water, right? And it indicates the presence of the Holy Spirit. So when people say, I always cry when I sing this hymn,
Yeah.
right? Or I always cry at this part of the Eucharist, or like that makes me cry. And then you can relate to that, because that's holy water. We've worked really hard to sort of separate ourselves from some of those experiences, and sometimes tears are just the way that God breaks through that, And that little bit of a poem really says, how could I welcome those? How could I welcome those feelings, or who would I share that with? Who could I share that with?
I had a friend, Judy Cottingham, who sang here for a little while. Ginger may have heard her, Liz. She had a fabulous voice, but there were times when she would sing solo in a couple different songs, and the tears just flowed. There was just no holding back. The tears were going to flow. And I felt like she was bringing me closer to God and celebrating her voice that was so God-given.
It was beautiful.
Talent. Yeah, and
Do you know where she is now?
No, but Ellen made my.
Ellen and Judy were good friends.
I knew they were. I think she and her husband were married, her ex-husband, which I thought was wonderful.
Yeah.
And Ellen said they're traveling a good bit, but I have not heard from her in a long time. So she's doing well, though, as far as I know.
She was good.
Yeah, I miss that voice. But sometimes even Maria Selmer has this thing with that. It's just that voice, and it just rises above every other voice in the choir until that man comes back in the summer. But there's just, I don't know, there's just something about those voices
Mhm.
and the music. In fact, Mary was saying something just recently during, it was during communion. And I was almost in tears. And I don't cry often. I used to cry all the time. I was a crybaby, but I don't cry so much anymore. I don't know why.
Well, maybe, she says in 57, why might I welcome the gift of tears? What are the losses that have gone unmourned because of the busyness of my life or my unwillingness to sit with the darkness? The gift of tears reveals to us the perfectionism, the games, the manipulations, and the stories we tell ourselves. They free us from lying and any form of pretense that takes over when we feel anxious. Tears of compunction arise when we are awakened to the realities that have been, until now, hidden beneath our conscious awareness. Often they are stirred when we deepen our practices and begin to get in touch with all the ways we have turned away from God and from ourselves. This goes back to that other part of the commandment, love, right? Love God, love one another as you love yourself, right? We discover something authentic and meaningful, and grief is unleashed over having ignored it for so long. Tears often emerge when the moment is ripe for us to see in a new way. Tears also arise when we recognize the ways we have been forcing the ripening within us rather than allowing it to happen. And I'm going to ask you if you've had that experience that she describes in the next paragraph. She talks about sitting in silence and then having sadness kind of well up in you, even though you weren't certain where it came from. It wasn't like you had to put your dog to sleep or your neighbor's moving, or there isn't anything, or someone said something awful to you. There isn't anything that actually causes it, but you felt it. And I think that requires that you spend some time in silence, right? It's not probably going to happen to you on a shopping trip, but it might happen when we've left some time for quiet. Because I have experienced that. Has anybody else had that experience?
Sitting still is a hard thing for me.
That's my problem too.
Sitting still.
Honesty here.
I had a spell of big time tears. I had a letter from a son who was then living in Baton Rouge and telling me he had been diagnosed with cancer and he was what kind of treatment he was going to do. But not to come over there to see about him. He did not want to see Jack and me. As a matter of fact, you'll be sorry you did because I have a gun. And I took that to be pretty horrible. And I cried about it. And as the months went by, and I kept crying about it, that as he was growing up, he certainly was part of our church family after he finished high school, and he had gone to 2 years at LSU, living in Alexandria where my parents and my sisters lived. And he didn't go to the Catholic Church or the Episcopal Church. He found some good friends that were Assembly of God and that were, and he would tell me about them. I said, that's just wonderful. But then it came back to me that, he was dying. And I needed to go have a hug, but I couldn't. So it was tough. I had many times when Jim Phipps had a class in what we call the old library, the sanctuary, the sacristy part. And, of course, I told my story to Jim. Jeff was born with cerebral palsy, so he had several kind of surgeries and troubles to work through, but he finished high school and he went to that 2 years. And then he didn't send us his anchor at that point. He got a job in Atlanta where we were living. And then we decided we were going to sell our house and build a house in Cashers, and he did. And after he worked at that job, well, about 3 years, he lost it. And he came up to Cashers after he was here several months. I said, Jeff, I'm not sure you're real happy living here. Not a lot he could do. He spent a lot of time going to Cashier's printing company where my friends Marcia and Dan were. And what would you like to do if you just could have your own choice? Well, I'd like to go to Baton Rouge and go back to LSU and finish so I can get my degree. Jack said, well, let's do that. And Jeff was driving his own car and took himself to Baton Rouge. My niece looked for an apartment. They couldn't find one to rent, but she found a brand new, really 1-bedroom condo, which she told us about, and we bought, and he moved in. It's fairly close to LSU, so it was wonderful. And we were all friends then, but after the cancer got to him, that's when he got his anger let go. So I cried all the time, and Jim was a good friend. Bless his heart. I finally said, Jack, I'm going to go to Baton Rouge. Whether he pulls a gun out or not, I don't know, but I'm going. I have got to see him before he dies because I've done something and I have to ask his forgiveness. So we went, and at that point the doctor had given him 6 months to live. And he was in a nursing home in Baton Rouge where hospitals would come see him, and that was good. He did not really want to see us. I leaned over to give him a hug in his wheelchair. I thought he was going to fall out trying to get away from me. But, it took a little while, but he finally opened up. Jack asked him if there was something he could do for him. He said he could go get me a strawberry milkshake. Thought Jack was going to break his leg getting out of there. Get to the McDonald's to get his strawberry milkshake. But that was the first time that he acknowledged the fact that we were there. It was okay. Jim Phipps and his wife live in Alexandria, Louisiana, which is 110 miles from Baton Rouge. And when I first got to Baton Rouge, I went to St. George Catholic Church because I had heard Jeff was going there sometimes. So I saw the priest. He said, yes. And he said, it's funny, you're the second person that's come to see me today about Jeff. I was a Episcopal priest. I said, I don't know who that could be. It was Jim Fitz. So Jim he had never met Jeff, but he knew right much about him. He told me later that he had gone to see Jeff before he drove back to Alexandria. He said, I walked in and I told him, Jeff, you don't know me, I'm Jim, and I just want you to know that I'm the angel of death that has come to see you, and let's get right, and I'll be back to see you again. He said, he didn't say a word, and I walked out. Wonderful. Anyway, Jeff died a few months after that, and he had in his wishes that he wanted to be cremated, and he had one friend who said he would take a container of ashes out in the Gulf to sprinkle them out there where the dolphins were always, because Jeff loved the dolphins because they moved so freely, and because Jeff's body never moved freely. So the dolphins were good. But the priest at St. George said he was not going to do memorial services. I was insisting to put his ashes in the Gulf. They needed to be in the ground. I said, I can arrange that.
I put them in the ground, I can dig them up.
He always loved one of my sisters who had a big house and plenty of acres around. So Marion gave me permission to put his ashes in their yard and plant a big oak tree, which I have a picture of now that is huge and beautiful. Of course, that's been, he died November 5, 1999, 25 years ago. Trees weren't a lot. But Jim is the one that came out and put his ashes in the dirt and planted the tree. It was good. I saw him when I was there in November. But having tear time and crying time was, I survived, but only I couldn't stop the tears. And I'd be fine, and all of a sudden I'd think about it, and
How they come.
yeah, so it was okay.
That was an important part.
Yes, and Jim was very important in helping me survive it, and know it was going to be okay.
There you go, a soul friend.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
right.
It was a suffer.
Yeah, he was.
We realized I spent the day with him. I was there in November.
Good. Good.
He and his wife.
The saint that she chose for this chapter is Saint Kevin, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with Saint Kevin, but Saint Kevin, much like Saint Gobnet, lived what I like to call that hinge time. There really wasn't a Celtic church in the sense that we maybe think about it today. There was a practice living close to nature. There was the practice of men and women who lived in solitude or lived with each other, who knew the land around them, who invited people to worship in the way they worship. Then when the Catholic Church came officially to Ireland, these saints became incorporated. Now, St. Kevin did not get recognized canonically until 1903. But for a long time had been acknowledged as someone important to the life of the community. And he, the stories about him, and you know, he's the patron saint of blackbirds.
That's a good story.
It's a great story. And there's a little book called, The Blackbird's Nest.
Oh, really?
And it's the story of St. Kevin, but it's a children's book, but it tells the same story. And then there's a guy named Seamus Hearne. He's a poet, an Irish poet, and he's written a poem about St. Kevin and the blackbirds. But it's just a poem written from the legend.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, and here's the problem. It's just much like Gobnet, nothing it was written contemporaneously about St. Kevin. St. Kevin apparently didn't have any friends who felt the urge to record what was happening.
Yeah.
So it would be some 200 years later when someone would finally write something about St. Kevin. And much like Gobnet, it was not happening at the same time. Be that as it may, right? Like, what do we say about scripture, particularly those first verses in Genesis, right? That is truth bigger than truth. That myth is a bigger truth than we can even comprehend. Whether or not there actually was an actual person named Adam and Eve. The same thing is true for these Irish saints, in a sense. Bridget, Kevin, Gobnet, they all existed without people actually recording their lives at that time. But who they were and what they represented, this sense of being present in the present moment, right? Because the story is, first of all, Kevin didn't get along. I mean, he was wild. He couldn't be settled. His parents sent him to the monastery to live, and he got sideways with all the other monks, and they made him go out for one Lent and spend time by himself. And I don't know what possessed him to stick his hand out the window and allow this bird to come and nest there and lay their eggs there and hatch there. But for the 40 days of Lent, that's what he did.
I thought that's pretty good that he would not move his hand, because he wanted it to let those eggs hatch.
Yes.
But I kind of had a hard time believing that too.
Oh,
I mean,
yes. So, but what could you take away
Made
from
my
it, right?
arm ache.
I don't know.
We should have tried at the beginning of class and started doing that, see how long we get survived.
I mean, I'm thinking, you know, personal needs and eating, and maybe hygiene wasn't all that important.
No.
I just,
Well, it's not putting yourself first, that's for sure.
That is right.
I mean, I've been known not to kill a spider or to move a bird nest or, you know, that's outside or things like that, but I thought.
Look at the big black,
Yes.
look at the big black snake and said, you know, you need to get out of the road, you can get run over.
Yeah.
Looks like you've been run over. I stopped and rolled down my window and started talking to the snake.
Oh, I had one curled up in one of my, boxes where my chickens lay eggs, and it was fairly dark in there, and I almost put my hand in, and then I thought, I think those feathers just moved. And it was a good black snake. It's been a couple years ago. We had to relocate that snake.
Yeah.
We didn't kill him, but we.
So we know how, even the concept of it is difficult for us
Yeah.
to imagine, let alone the practicality of it.
Yeah.
But this idea of attention to something, particularly in nature, the intimacy with nature, this is a very Celtic understanding of the world, and that Kevin had this ability to be with animals, much like St. Patrick, much like St. Francis, right? In different places. Isn't it amazing? This idea of being with nature. This is existing in Italy at the same time it's happening in Ireland. It's not, there's something there. There's just something about that that kind of is, what does she say? That we should pray to St. Kevin in a sense, in order for us maybe to perhaps find a soul friend. right, that maybe that attention to that would bring that to us. There's a couple of things at the end of the chapter, one being this poem by David White, who we talked about before. David White, a current poet, writes about spiritual issues quite a bit, lovely writer. And then her poem that she wrote about Saint Kevin holds open his hand. Anything about this, the end of the chapter? The writing exploration was, I want to know, and that was fun for me to write. So.
Well, back on the top of page 59, you know, what struck me about that was how many times do we reach out our hands for a particular purpose and something else arrives. And that's like St. Kevin, he was praying and he had the habit of reaching out his arm to pray. Something else arrived.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you.
Well,
Okay.
this is kind of, I mean, I thought that it was interesting that on page 64, when she mentioned that the role that animals and dogs can play is being a soul friend. And I thought that, I mean, she just mentioned it and didn't really go into it, but I think that is certainly true. And any of us who have had dogs as part of our families know the importance of the dog and all the things you can tell the dog and the things the dog can teach you. So I thought it was wonderful that was mentioned. That's kind of off the topic of the rest of the things we've been talking about, but important.
I think so. And she also says even relationships with those who have gone before, right? And that it's not maybe in the living in the now, but maybe also saints that we have identified with or people that we have known that are not really physically with us anymore. But I think that's true. There's no way to know that. I had a friend who was a songwriter and she wrote a song about her dog and it said, I wish I was half the person my dog thinks I am.
Right.
That's good.
You know, my granddaughter, the ones that don't know, is a boarding student at high school, but she's about 50 minutes away from home and she doesn't come home that often, but a lot of times she'll say, I need to come home and see my dog. And she swears up and down that this dog, who is a big Rhodesian Ridgeback, is her soul friend. I mean, she's always said that from the day that they got the dog. So,
I can do too, that's good.
That's awesome. I love that.
I remember, you know, the kid, when I was upset about something, I got sit on the back porch and my beagles would be both beside me, I was crying.
I think I know. We have one especially, we have two labs, and one especially if she senses anything about me that's a little off, she's right beside me. I mean, she's right there. So I think they just
That's
know.
your girlfriend.
Yeah.
That's, yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, Laura, thank you for that thing that we don't often know that something we're doing, that something else may land there, right?
Yeah.
I just think that's, you know, he's standing in the cruciform, that's how he prays. How many pictures of St. Francis have you seen that way, right? And, but anyway, so he's standing that way and something else occurs. And that we don't have to script it all out.
Yeah.
We don't have to know oh my goodness, yes. Yes. You know, we could be very much praying something different. And isn't that really more likely to happen than not?
If we reach our arms out.
If you reach your arms out. Yeah. Well, thank you all for being here. And next week, we're going to do the practice of encircling. And I'll leave that up for you to read and we can talk about that next week. Lots of Celtic prayers that have the word circle in them and that image of a circle. And if you think about the Celtic cross, what makes it the Celtic cross? There's a circle around the cross, right? So an important symbol in that way. So I'm going to close by reading St. Kevin open his hand, holds. How about if I start over? St. Kevin holds open his hand. Imagine being like Kevin. Your grasping fist softens, your fingers uncurl, and palms open, rest upward, and the blackbird weaves twigs and straw and bits of string in the begging bowl of your hand. You feel the delicate weight of the speckled blue orbs descend and her feathered warmth settling in for a while. How many days can you stay open, waiting for the shell to fissure and crack, awaiting the slow emergence of tiny gaping mouths and slick wings that need time to strengthen? Are you willing to wait and watch? To not withdraw your affections too soon? Can you fall in love with the exquisite ache in your arms, knowing the hatching it holds? Can you stay not knowing how broad those wings will become or how they will fly awkwardly at first, then soar above you? Until you have become the sky and all that remains is your tiny shadow swooping across the earth. So, and you go forth, falling in love with the exquisite ache in your arms.
You have to.
Well, no, there are no have-tos, there might be some want-tos. All right. Yes, absolutely. All right, go in peace to love and serve the Lord.
Thanks, sweetie.